So, all we need to do in order to stop climate change is spend about $73 trillion globally. And with that investment, using solar and wind and an interconnected grid and not even nuclear power, and we're going to get so many jobs. That's all we have to do to stop climate change, to incorporate 80 something percent or 80% of our energy will be coming from renewable resources by 2030, and we will complete the change by 2050. That's all we have to do is spend about $73 trillion globally, 7.8 trillion for the US individually. That's it. Of course, that's not really going to happen. Now, I went looking to see if somebody had calculated how much it would cost globally to change over completely to renewable energy. And I found this website. I believe it's 360yale.edu, and I believe it's an environmental related group that is on Yale campus or connected to Yale. And overall, I went looking and I wanted to find out just that number, really. And I thought that, oh, wow, that's a huge, horrible number. And it is. And it is really off-putting. But the thing about it is that when I actually delved into the article itself, it wasn't that off-putting. I mean, the numbers definitely are the numbers are really, really hard to swallow. But one of the things that make it a lot more palatable is that they say that the whole system is going to pay for itself in 7 years. And I was like, wow, that is pretty interesting. Now, my whole attitude about climate change is that, I mentioned it a number of times, I don't think anybody would have seen it, is that we're not going to do it. And I think that the numbers are really part of it, but I think that beyond that, it's just habit. It's really just habit. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time in order to change our habits. Right now, I think at one point, and the US has good figures, so that's what you end up using all the time. I think at some point, at the highest point in the US with respect to smoking, that 50% of the population used to smoke. Now I think that it's down to 20%, which is really great. It means that 30% of people don't smoke, who would have been smoking. But it also means that about 20% of the population still smokes, and we know that it causes cancer and it's going to kill you, whether it is by heart disease or strokes or cancers of all the various kinds that you can get. And these are people who are still smoking, who took up smoking when all of this stuff has been established, that this thing is going to kill you. And you have a higher likelihood of getting COPD, that's, cardiopulmonary disease, all of these stuff. You're going to smell bad. You have an increased likelihood of getting colds. I mean, all of this stuff we already know, and people are still smoking. And there's no benefit to it whatsoever, except for that high that you keep chasing that you got the first couple of times that you smoked. And most of the time you don't have it anymore. I mean, I know that. That's what I wanted. Every time I smoked, I was like, that high, I hope I can get that high from way back when. And every once in a while you get it, but the rest of the time, you just end up smelling like an ashtray. Disgusting. And I used to feel intimidated by it. It would prevent me from even talking to girls and stuff. And yet, in spite of all that, I could not imagine stopping smoking. It was, of course, I tried a couple of times, and what really helped me is that I knew people who had stopped. But I could not imagine wanting even to not smoke. Now, here we are with respect to oil and everything and fossil fuels. We have this resource that we don't have to worry about storage. You know, you fill up your gas tank, you drive wherever you want to drive. It takes a couple seconds, maybe a couple minutes to fill up your tank, and you can drive for a couple of days even. Well, not really, but yeah, you know. And that kind of convenience of being able to do that and not have to worry about whether or not your car is charged, you know. We already know how to deal with fossil fuels. We already have that down. We know what it's about. And there's so many aspects of it that are convenient. And we don't actually have to change anything if we decide that we're not going to change anything, right? I mean, the world is just going to get worse and worse and worse. So here it is that we have, there are many, many people who still don't believe in this. And in a way, worse than that, there are many, many people who do believe in it, but they think that all we have to do is plant some more trees, or we just get rid of plastic straws. There are just so many people who do not seem to understand the dramatic, large-scale changes that we have to do. I mean, I think the US economy itself is like 26 trillion a year, and what's going to be needed is 7.8 trillion. So that's almost a quarter of the entire US economy. The global economy, I think, is about 80 trillion annually. That's the GDP. And what's required is going to take about 73 trillion. And if we want to do about 80% of that in the next 10 years, it means that we're probably going to need somewhere like a tenth of, probably less than that, but like a tenth of the world economy. Like all that money that we spent every year for the next 10 years in order to accomplish this thing. Now, these people at Yale, they say that this thing is entirely feasible. It's, it will generate so many jobs. There's going to be savings in terms of money every single year. There's going to be lives that are saved. All of that stuff is really, really great. But it's like telling somebody that, hey, if you start exercising now and eating less and taking care of yourself, life is going to be great. If you start saving your money and not going out on spending sprees and basically the same thing that we've told people, that people already know that they need to do with their lives and their bodies. And many, many people don't want to do it. And if we, the ones who do want to do it, are to accomplish it, we are going to have to, number one, steel ourselves to do that, which is really hard. For example, they say that 66% or 2/3 of people who get a random amount of money spend it out within a couple of years and they're back to scratch in terms of people who win the lottery or something like that. So 2/3 of us can't, even if we have this resources are dropped in our lap, 2/3 of us don't know how to make it last. We just easy come, easy go. And I think it's something more than 2/3 of us are either overweight or obese right now. And we're not, there's no movement to change that. So based on how we treat our bodies, based on how we treat our finances, it doesn't seem likely that we're going to fix anything with respect to the planet when we can't stop smoking, we can't stop eating and start exercising, we can't save money, whether, we win the lottery or something like that. So how are we supposed to do something that's similar to all of those things, but more important, Actually, is it more important? If we drop dead right now, do we care about climate change? Do we care about our finances? Do we care about our bodies? No. So our lives are more important than, the environment and climate change. But we can't do anything about that. Well, not that we can't. Most of us don't. So it's only natural that most of us are not going to do what's needed in order to accomplish this stuff. And, I have a couple of videos there where I say that, hey, we're not going to do this. But I wanted something based on the numbers. And this is a number that I forgot to put in. The amount of money that was spent on renewable investment in 2019 was something like $283 trillion. I mean, not trillion, of course we'd have solved the problem. Billion. So it means that to get to a trillion, we need to spend about 4 times that. Right. And why am I saying that we need to spend 4 times that? Well, just to make the calculation a little bit easier, I guess. So we need to, at least the Yale people are saying that we can get to 80% of renewable energy as our source of energy by 2030. And that's important because the IPCC, that body that does all of the calculations and stuff with respect to this information, they're telling us that we need to have at least 50% of our energy come from renewables by 2030. That's why 2030 matters. And we need to have 100% of it by 2050. That's why 2050 matters. So really, we don't have to have, the 80% that this group at Yale is saying. We don't have to have that done by 2030. We can have 50% of it done by 2030. So 50% of basically the world GDP. Well, let's just use the US for example. So we have $7.8 trillion that the US needs in order to transfer over, and we need to have half of that done by 2030. So let's just say that it is $4 trillion needs to be spent by 2030 to get half of our half of the energy from renewables. So that means it's about $500 billion every year. So I can't remember how much the US invested. That's what I was going to use that number. So I guess let's go back to using the whole number. So half of that, of the whole amount that the world needs to spend, is about 40 trillion. And that's over the next 10 years. So it's 4 trillion a year. And I think in 2019, they spent 283 billion over the whole world. That's an investment. So all we need to do is to increase that by 10 times, more than 10 times. It's from 283, so let's call it 133% increase to get from 280 something billion to 400 billion, and then multiply that by 10. So we need to increase the amount of money that we spent last year by about 13 times, and then keep doing that every year for the next 10 years. Yeah, that's all we have to do while we're fighting COVID, of course. So we just need to 13 times all of our efforts in the world, and while fighting COVID and recessions and whatever else. So conceivably, that's probably not going to happen. That's probably not going to really occur. Because that's the thing about doing anything, accomplishing your goals. You can't decide that you're going to do 10 times as much just like that on a dime. It doesn't happen. the way that we accomplish our goals is by doing a little bit, or really by doing a little bit more every day. That's something that we can do sustainably. If you do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. But we need to do 13 times as much in the first year and then continue that. And if we don't do that and we do it a little bit, then we need to do by many more times than 13 times more if we're building up to that. The 13 times only works if you go straight to that and then you maintain. So if we're going to take our time to build up to that in the first, 5 years or something, by the time you reach the 5th year, the amount that you have to do, the summit of what you have to do is a lot higher than the 13 times. So anyway, this is a messy video, but it's something that I had to do, even though it's messy, because otherwise I would have never ended up doing it. So there's that. Anyway, hopefully this was useful to somebody for some reason, even though we're not going to accomplish that. Bye.